radio the way it should be.
You are listening to Slap Radio.
What's good, High State? We are broadcasting live from the Slap Studio in Chinatown High, where the streets and the arts meet. We got DJ Drum on the turntables. We got Mike and Apollo behind the lens. I'm your host, James Westbrook, and you're tuned in to Slap Radio, the sight and sound of Hawaii. To join us today, we have a very special guest here. He was born and raised in Hilo, graduated from Kamehameha, received his bachelor's in arts and journalism at the University of Hawaii, received his associates at San Diego Mesa College. He was the first native Hawaiian editor of a surfing publication. He also is a coach, or was a coach, at Kamehameha. He has also written for multiple publications, including Star Bulletin. He helped put together Contrast Magazine. He's also part of the Paea Projects. He's also a producer on the show called Simon Says, which is featured on Hawaiian Airlines as of now, but will definitely branch out later. He currently works for FCH Enterprises, which is a family branch off of the Zippies. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Daniel Ito.
How's it?
Welcome to the show.
Okay, James, I should just say, as a journalist, or as a former journalist, we always stress accuracy. So, technically, I was born at Kapiolani Medical Center.
Got you.
Yeah. Raised in Hilo.
Okay.
And I'm still a coach at Kamehameha Surf Team.
Okay.
Which is nuts because this is my 10th season. And I thought I was only going to be in there for 2 seasons.
Wow. So, I mean, because you're doing the journalism, you have so much going on, but you still find the time to coach. And you've coached some pretty, high-end surfers to come out of there. One of them being Ezekiel Lau. How do you find the time to coach and still do your journalism and still do like your Zippies thing?
I think I found the time to do journalism and coaching Kamehameha Surf Team by making my passion my lifestyle. And so a lot of my social life was going out and chasing stories in Chinatown. A lot of my free time was surfing, and so using that passion and incorporating that into other things like giving back to Kamehameha, which gave so much to me. It was, hey, I get to go surfing, but I get to go surfing with kids and try to help kids get to a place that I eventually found and help them get there faster. And then also, like my wife, Kahina, always says, you don't know how to say no to things. And I always counter that point by saying, why should I say no if I know how to do it? And so just having that mentality of I always can do it, and to make all the things that I love to do and my work, my play, as well as my play being work, allows me to fit a lot more into a day than I think a lot of other people will. Because a lot of other people, they want to compartmentalize their professional life as well as their social life. Instead, I just made it all one thing. Mm-hmm. And at times, I think it was overwhelming. But in the end, I always think about this. It's if I got hit by a bus walking out of the studio, I would be really proud of everything I just did. I would feel very fulfilled.
Absolutely. Your whole journey started with journalism, and it started in an interesting way. Can you talk about how it started?
Sure. So being from Hilo, I was a boarder at Kamehameha Kapalama. Being a boarding student means that you live at school and you don't have regular access to transportation or even the beach that normal kids have, right? So that limited access to leaving campus really fueled my love of reading surf magazines. So I'm in the dorms. I was in Iolani dorm. Chose to go to Iolani dorm because that was known as the surfer dorm, because my dorm advisor, Kimo Middlesworth, who trained professional surfers. And so sometimes you'd forget something and you got to go back to the dorm to go get a book or something like that. And then there would be Kalani Robb, Sonny Garcia, Tony Moniz in the lounge of my dorm because they just got done training and they were training with Kimo and doing cross training. So then you would kind of trip out that you see these guys. at the same time, Chemo had a subscription to every single surf magazine. We called Chemo Middlesworth Mids. So Mids would always kick down in surf magazines, and I would spend the whole time that I had a free time and I wanted to go and surf, I would read these magazines from cover to cover. And that love of reading magazines actually came from my parents and playing Nintendo. And the first magazine subscription I ever had was Nintendo Power. And my parents were always, you couldn't have every video game, you can't have every toy, but if you ever wanted a magazine or you want a comic book, they would always get it for me. And so I kind of took that same practice and that same love of reading to when I got to high school and I was reading the surf magazines. And I go to Mids and I'm like, hey Mids, I'm reading all these surf magazines, I don't see any other bylines of native Hawaiians. Like, how come I don't see a native Hawaiian editor of surf magazines? And he goes, there's none. And so I kind of took that personally, and that was my first chip on the shoulder, was, wow, Hawaiians, kanaka maoli, we invented he'inalu, yet we don't have a voice in mainstream surf media. And I took that as a challenge, and okay, if that doesn't exist, let me make it exist by being the first person. And so that was my drive coming out of high school, and why I ended up going to college in San Diego was I wanted to be close to the surf industry, and I wanted to be the first native Hawaiian editor of a surf magazine.
Which you did, and then you decided to come back to Hawaii after your schooling out in the mainland, right? So you came back and you got the gig as the first Hawaiian editor. And why do you think they gave you the edge?
So I came back in winter 2005, and at the time I just came off of being an intern at Surfing Magazine. And so when I came back, I was covering what's usually called the post North Shore season. So that's all the contests that are after the Triple Crown. The Triple Crown happens from November to December, and that is Haleiwa, the Hawaiian Pro, World Cup of Surfing, Sunset, and the Pipe Masters. All the other contests after that, though, I mean, all Hawaiians know, and if you're a surfer and you know anything, it's like that's actually when the waves are the best, because it takes some time for all the big swells to come, grab all the sand, and put it back into the reef. So I come in Surfing Magazine and my parents that like, oh, it's a good idea if I skip a semester of school. Let me go back to Oahu. Let me chase some stories. And while I'm on Oahu, I reach out to Mike Latronic, who was my first real boss of a real job. I reach out to Mike Latronic. He's the publisher and creator of Free Surf Magazine, Board Stories Television. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, hey, my name's Daniel Ikaika Ito. This is my resume. If you have any writing needs, I'm here. So Mike looks at my resume and then he calls me in for a meeting. So I come into the meeting. Mike and I hit it off, and he's like, hey, why don't you keep coming back to the office? And you know what? Hey, what if we make you this associate editor? I'm like, wow, cool. So then I started doing that. Fast forward to July 2005. I'm already planning to go back to San Diego, to go back to college. And just happened to be that the editor of Free Surf at the time, she was going to go back to grad school. And so Mike goes, hey, would you drop out of school if I made you the editor? And I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm going to drop out of school. Yes, Mike, this is like the best thing ever. Like, you're going to pay me to be who I always wanted to be career-wise. And you have this house office across the street of VLAN. And so, like, I got to come here every day. And you're going to give me insurance. Awesome. I thought I made it.
Explain what VLAN is.
VLAN is Velzi Land. Now we know it as its Hawaiian name. Its original name is called Kauna La. And VLAN is a right-hand reef break. And there's the left too, but everybody knows it for the right. And I would say that's my favorite wave in the world. And I got to surf there all the time while I was editor of Free Surf Magazine. And I had 2 really, really good years working really hard for shit money but just loving the whole experience of it.
So you got the experience, and were you planning on going back to school afterwards?
I was always kind of planning to, but I thought I didn't need to. And that was probably my immaturity at the time, where after I was done with Free Surf Magazine, to be perfectly honest, I got burnt out from writing about surfing every day.
Okay.
And getting burnt out from doing something you love it's kind of weird, because you still love doing it, you just don't love talking about it. You don't love writing about it anymore, you know? And I think that was also a point in my life where I didn't really know what to do with that chip on the shoulder that I think a lot of Kane have, you know, just being Hawaiian and understanding Hawaiian history and the overthrow and then the place of Hawaiians in society today. You know, that was like a lot of emotions when I look back on were probably like hindering my growth. And I think all of that, coupled with being burnt out, it probably set me back some. And, you know, like a lot of things that I knew were fun just weren't that fun anymore. And it wasn't until like I really let go of a lot of that, then it became fun and became a passion again.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got Daniel Ikaika Ito in the house right now. We're going to take a break right now, but when we come back, we're going to get back into your progression in your career. Daniel Ito, everybody. We are back in the mix right now. We got Daniel Ikaika Ito in the mix right now. So we were talking about you going to school, but also doing a lot of other things on the side. Explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're keeping tabs on how many segments we have by how many beers that are in front of me. So I'm on the second one right now. Okay. One of the things I did a lot in college, and why I tell kids you should go to college, is it's totally legit to drink all the time when you're in college. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I did in college was I made my professional life, my social life. I basically worked 5 part-time jobs while I was in my last 2 years of college to equate to 1 full-time paycheck. And that was barely a full-time paycheck. I think the biggest mistake I made in my last 2 years of college and working these jobs was I was a W-9 employee, did not save any money for taxes, and got popped by the IRS eventually. Had to pay a bunch of back taxes on it. But when you're a kid, you know, and you're doing something that you love, and you're kind of living paycheck to paycheck, because a lot of people don't realize too, like surfing and the surf industry, like a net 30, you're lucky. Net 60, kind of standard. Other than that, it's like, who knows when the check's gonna come. When the check comes and you need the check, it's like you spend that whole thing right there.
What's a net 30? What's a
net
60?
30 is 30 days from when you complete the job and you send the invoice, you should be paid for that.
Okay.
A net 60 is 60 days from when you submit the invoice and you completed the job, you should get paid from that.
Okay.
And so not understanding the business side of being a freelance journalist and freelance public relations specialist, it kind of fucked me up, you know. And I think that experience makes me a lot more of a savvy entrepreneur now, but also a better mentor. So like when I'm always talking to younger people, especially when they're doing freelance work, it's, hey, how are you set up right now? Are you just getting paid, or do you have a LLC? Mm-hmm. Okay, so are you taking a third of that check that you get and putting it away for taxes? And so it's stuff like that. And, you know, James, like, this will sound kind of sappy, but the best business move I ever made in my life was I married an accountant. And my wife knows that when we came together, that she put all my finances and everything straight, which allowed me to focus on just making money in business. At the time, though, when I'm in college, I'm doing public relations specialist for the Vans Triple Crown of Surfing, because it was owned by Vans at the time. I was also covering surfing for the Star Bulletin, which eventually bought the Honolulu Advertiser and became the Star Advertiser.
But you were able to hold on to the gig, right? You were able to hold on to the job.
Yes, I just happened to be on the right side of the regime change. Okay. So, and in addition, like, I'm still a contributing writer at Surfing Magazine, and then ESPN came along, and I got to cover surfing for ESPN.com, and that's still like one of the highlights of my career. Is, you know, like, I used to get a check that had Mickey Mouse on it because Disney owns ESPN, and that's some of my proudest work. So I'm going to school full time, and when there would be a contest day, my journalism professors were cool because they knew that all these jobs that we were doing was not slanging coffee or like working at a restaurant or, you know, working retail. It was always to advance my career. So in my class, I was always kind of ahead of everybody because I had all this real world experience and I was still doing it at the same time. So they were pretty cool about me going. So like my best days when I was a freelance journalist was I would work from about like 7 o'clock to about 3:30, and that was at the contest. So if the contest is running, working 7 o'clock to 3:30, and I'm guiding media around the contest site. I'm watching heats. I'm doing post-heats interviews for all the B-roll. And so like what B-roll is just raw footage of action. And A-roll is the interview. So then I would go and help do some interviews, and basically that gets all sent at the end of the day. And then the contest day is called the VNR, or a video news release. So while I'm doing that, though, I'm also kind of writing a local perspective story in my head with the Star Advertiser. So sometimes I would hold a microphone and I would hold my phone, and the iPhone was still new at this time. This is like iPhone OG.
Okay.
and I'm recording, and I remember too my mom telling me, like, that's so irresponsible that you bought an iPhone. Like, you don't need that. And I was like, Mom, this device can do everything my computer does and more, and like, this is just like the best tool I've ever seen. And I consider this an investment into my career. So like, I'm recording both ways, but what I'm recording on my iPhone is my Star Advertiser story and my ESPN story, and these are the interviews. So like, you know, like, I'm kind of like double teaming it, and I'm always really proud to say that I used to triple dip the Triple Crown. And so like, once 3:30 hit, I would go and file a story for the Star Advertiser, file it at like 4:30, maybe go and surf from like 4:45 to about like 6 o'clock, 6:30. Wintertime, the sun goes down a little earlier. And then I would go to Palakai Bakery, get a Coors Light Tall Boy, see if there was some 50% off pastry goods, and like get a couple pieces of fried chicken and a musubi. Take that home, and I would eat and drink, and then I would file my ESPN story. And this is like probably around like 9 o'clock, 9:30. Send it off, go to sleep, and do the whole thing the next day again. And those were like glory days for me.
Oh, I'm sure. And you're interviewing the surfers in the Triple Crown?
Interviewing the surfers in the Triple Crown.
That's pretty amazing. And you're still going to school at the same time?
Yep. And when it wasn't Triple Crown season or there wasn't a contest, I would just pick up any type of PR job I could. So I got to do some stuff for Red Bull, got to meet a lot of people. I got to mahalo Rob Mora and Travis Watanabe for putting me on at that time.
Shout out to them.
And any surf story, I was just hungry. I was always looking for another story because I had to just keep that check coming. And at the same time, I'm working on a passion project. And Contrast Magazine was something that was actually supposed to be a TV show. And it was supposed to be kind of like the Hawaiian version of In Living Color, and it was something I was working on with Darius Legg.
Okay, yeah, Darius Legg.
And
shout out to him too.
Yeah, so like we were kind of trying to figure out this TV show, and it wasn't really going anywhere. And I was like, like I don't know how to do TV as well as I know how to do print. And then I keep looking at Free Surf magazine where I came from, and looking at Heavy Wire magazine and going, you know what, me and my friends are into so many other things than just pure surfing. You know, there's this emerging music scene happening in Chinatown with hip hop and punk rock shows. There's all these cool underground fashion shows, and we were all hanging out with skateboarders at the same time. So it was like, okay, these magazines that are supposed to be talking to me and my peers are only covering this really small part of our lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
What if we just took the whole lifestyle and we put it into a print magazine? And that's what Contrast was. And not having any real capital to start a company or any business knowledge, was like, hey, you know what, I'm gonna get 6 other of my friends together and we're gonna do this. So 7 dudes, we were making this magazine from our laptops on the weekends and at night. But once again, that was a way that I made my professional life my social life, because all the cool stuff that we got to do at Contrast magazine, we were always gonna read a story about.
Mm-hmm.
All, you know, like all the stories that we were chasing, we made sure there were beers and drinks and all of that at the same time. And so when we came out with Contrast magazine, it was kind of weird because I was going to school, and when my professors found out about it, they were really proud of it, and they were like, wow, you know, one of our students did this. But at the same time, like, I didn't feel like it was successful because we were still like way in the hustle. Mm-hmm. You know, and we borrowed money, and if I was to go back and tell young Ito anything, was like, hey, don't just borrow enough money for one issue. Borrow like money for 5 years of a company.
Right.
And so, you know, in the end, Contrast, I would say, was successful because it provided a body of work that allowed me to get all these other jobs. And by the time when I graduated college and I met my wife, and I wanted to impress my in-laws that I could go and work a real job, when I went to go and work at HMSA, which is an insurance company, I had this body of work. I had Contrast magazine to show, like, hey, this is my resume, but look at this body of work that I produced.
That seems like a whole different direction than what you were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So HMSA, what happened with that?
Like I said, I just wanted to impress my in-laws. Like, we weren't married yet, but I had to kind of like prove to them. And then also my mom at the time too was kind of like, so is this all you're gonna do the rest of your life? Because at that point I didn't feel the need to own a house or have a nice car. I was like, Mom, I buy surfboards and shoes. Those are my 2 favorite things to buy. Still to this day, that's my 2 favorite things to buy, surfboards and shoes.
Okay.
And I remember one time my mom and I gained a little argument, and she was battling breast cancer at the time, and she's fine now. And it was kind of all right, Mom, to make you happy, I'm gonna fill out this application, and you know what, I'm gonna go through the process, and we'll just see what the process comes through. And then, you know, when I got the job, it's like, okay, I'm gonna take it. And that was like my first taste of a corporate job. And I worked with some really nice people, and I learned a lot, but in the end it was stifling creatively. You know, and I was a digital content coordinator was my title.
Okay.
And so like my job was installing and managing the content of all these digital displays for internal communication, when I was still covering surf contests on the side, and I was still doing Contrast magazine. So like it'd be kind of like, hey, I wear my khakis and my Sperry topsiders and like Sig Zane Aloha shirt, and I tuck it in, and I go to work, and I'm like this like nice little like corporate Japanese Hawaiian kid. And then afterwards it was like, okay, I'm gonna go and run the streets, and the whole time I'm there, I'm thinking like, how do I get out of here?
Okay.
And the way I got out of there was by becoming the director of sales and marketing for Waiоla Coconut Water, which was like my first like really nuts sales job. And while I was on Keaumoku in HMSA, me and Dave Lynn were friends, and Dave Lynn and I were friends from.
And Dave Lynn is who?
Dave Lynn is one of the owners of Kicks, and he is also the owner and founder of Waiоla Coconut Water.
Okay.
And we were friends through Kuha'o Zane.
Okay. Sig Zane.
Yeah. And I would go and consult, and I would go and have lunch at Dave's office in Keaumoku. And like I would consult on Waiоla, and he was talking to me about coconut water at the time. Like I was really into fitness and CrossFit and getting healthy, and so like coconut water kind of seemed like the thing, and this is like 2012. Yeah, 2012, 13.
So you graduated college already?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Graduated college, went to corporate America, worked for the Death Star of medical insurance, met Darth Vader.
Wow.
And then after I was like, you know what, over that. Like I want to do something else. And then it just happened that Dave was like, hey, I want to bring you on full time. What would it take? And I'm like, okay, I want to make what I'm making at Waiola, and I want a director position. I want to be director of sales and marketing, and I want to lead a team. And that was, other than being editor of magazines, I think that was like my first leadership role where I knew that it was incumbent of me to build a system and a structure. Mm-hmm. Before that, I was like inheriting structures, or in contrast, it was trying to replicate a system that I was used to at Free Surf Magazine, right? And also too, what should be said with Contrast Magazine is that we were all partners. There were 7 of us, and we all considered ourselves equal. And if I was going to give anybody any business advice later, it would be that, in business you can't really do that. You got to have like hierarchy, and what comes with hierarchy is vision. And you got to have 1 or 2 people's vision to guide everything else.
Absolutely.
And it was Dave's vision of Waiola that really made me go there.
Okay.
And what I learned in Waiola was, 1, that the beverage industry is cutthroat, but 2, Dave Lynn is still one of the best salespeople I've ever met. Like Dave Lynn will sell an AC unit to Eskimo like that. And I learned a lot of valuable sales knowledge and pitch from Dave, and that's what makes me so different than other journalists, was that I know how to sell. I don't like it, but I like negotiating, actually.
Okay.
And later on in my career, so like I did Waiola for a couple years, then Miss Journalism. My wife was, she was my girlfriend and fiance at the time. She was over the hours I was putting in. Waiola, because there was a lot of like nightlife, schmoozing, taking clients out.
Of course, because you got a network, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's not only the network, it's like beverage industry, it's whoever has the most dollars is gonna win. And so like what you want to do with those dollars is schmooze them as much as possible, so that they're gonna carry your product and they're gonna promote your product. Okay. And so after a while, I think that got a little taxing on my relationship, and still I'm making my professional life, my personal life,
of course,
and my social life at the same time. And those were good years, But then I went back to journalism, and so there was an opportunity that came up to be digital media manager for Mana magazine, which was a Native Hawaiian magazine, and something that was like very close to my heart. And I think what really got me that job was I applied for the editor position. I didn't get it, but when I went to my interview, in my interview, the publisher is like, oh, okay, hey, can we meet on this day? I was like, nah, I can't meet on that day. They're like, oh, well, are you not interested in the job? I'm like, no, I'm interested in the job. I'm just going to Maui that day, and I'm going to go and have breakfast with Anthony Bourdain. They're like, Anthony Bourdain, no reservations, Anthony Bourdain? I'm like, yeah. And what happened was I was invited to be interviewed by Anthony Bourdain on Parts Unknown.
Okay.
And that is why I will always say Contrast was successful, because if it wasn't for Contrast magazine, that interview wouldn't happen. And when I was a Grom in San Diego, at San Diego Mesa College, my professor was like, hey, you should watch this show, No Reservations, you'll like it. So I started watching it, and then I remember being in my apartment drinking with my friends, watching it and going, wow, if I ever get to have a beer with this guy, I'll feel like I made it.
Well, I definitely want to talk about that experience. We're going to go to break right now, but when we come back, we're going to talk about that experience. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel Ito in the house, Slap Radio. Let's go. We're back in the mix right now. We got Daniel Ikaika Ito in the mix. He's dropping them gems right now. We're giving a round of applause. I'm your host, James Westbrook. So we talked about the Anthony Bourdain.
That's what made the crowd go nuts and actually clap more, was when I said Anthony Bourdain.
Anthony Bourdain, huh? Yeah, I'm sure. So walk us through that, because you got the call. You're about to be on Mana magazine.
Right. So the way the Anthony Bourdain thing came together was when I was the editor of Free Surf magazine. There was only 2 Native Hawaiian photographers at the time, and one of them was Mana, Jeff Walhall, who has since passed away. Rest in paradise, Jeff.
Rest in paradise.
And then the second was Alan Mozo. Alan Mozo is the brother of John Mozo, and I would always try to work with Alan or Mana anytime I had to do a story on the West Side, or if there was a Hui o He'enalu story or something where I knew, like, I just need this other Hawaiian to go in there with me and we're gonna get a better story from it. And so, like, Alan and I became friends. I mean, Mana and I were friends too. Then I remember Alan shot one of my best friend Pono's wedding. One of my
shout
partners,
out to Pono.
yeah,
Paea Projects. Let's go.
And then out of the blue, Alan calls me, and I'm director of sales and marketing at Wyola at the time. He's like, hey, how you doing, Ito? Hey, what's up, Alan? He's like, hey, are you still doing Kamehameha Surf Team? Yeah, still coaching Kamehameha Surf Team. Are you still doing Contrast? Yeah, still doing Contrast and freelance journalism. He's like, oh, okay, I'm working for this production. I can't tell you what it is, but would you be willing to share your story with my boss? And I was like, Alan, for you, whatever, bro. You tell him, call me. Like, it's all good. So then Alan's boss calls me the next day, and then we have this conversation for like an hour, 15 minutes, and I'm giving him the same thing that you hear on Parts Unknown with Anthony Bourdain, and it's basically my theory that there's 2 cultures that run together in different times in Hawaii, and one is Hawaiian culture, which was started by the indigenous people and Native Hawaiians, and the second is local culture, which is a product of a bunch of different ethnicities coming together in the plantations, right? Native Hawaiian culture is founded on being all-inclusive, and the best way you can describe that is aloha. Local culture is kind of founded on exclusivity, because all of these minorities had to kind of figure out how to get along with each other, but they all knew, like, oh, we're the working class. like we're the minorities, and there's still this ruling class that is predominantly Caucasian or without breath or haole, and a lot of local culture is based on you're either local or you're haole.
Okay.
You know, when Hawaiians, we weren't really like that. It was more like, oh, you're haole because you don't embrace the same way as we do, but hey, let us host you, let's learn from you, you know. And so like I'm telling the producer this whole thing, and this was a spiel that I would give to a lot of visiting journalists while I'm working at the Triple Crown. So it was like something I was very comfortable to talk with, and like I still can talk about the whole thing. Anyway, the producer's like, oh, I really like what you said. You know, we're looking for this young Native Hawaiian journalist, and I can't tell you what the show is, but would you be willing to talk to her director? And I was like, I'll talk to your director, but I'm not going to talk to him for another hour, 15 minutes. At best, he gets 5-10 minutes, you know, because at this point, I'm like, okay, I felt like I did my favor to Alan already. And just, I got other shit to do. Next day, the director calls me, and it's like, yeah, hey, you know, I don't have that much time for you, but yeah, what's up? Oh, yeah, okay, like, this is where I'm from, you know, my family, my dad's from Maui, my mom's from Oahu, but, like, all of my mom's family is from Hawaii Island. And then the guy goes, oh, do you know who Anthony Bourdain is? And in the back of my head, I'm kind of thinking about it, like, hey, this kind of sounds like Parts Unknown right now. And like, in my wildest dreams, it would have been. And then I was like, of course I know Anthony Bourdain. It was like, oh, well, you know, would you want to be on Parts Unknown? And it was almost like when I got offered the job at Free Surf Magazine, it was like, oh, fuck yeah, I'll be on Parts Unknown. Like, what do I got to do? Like, thank you, Alan. And
shout out Alan.
Yeah, Alan Mozo made it happen. And so if I ever talk about success when it comes to Contrast Magazine, I will always say Contrast Magazine was successful because I got to meet a hero of mine. You know, all of my other work experience, the other hero of mine that I got to meet and do a story about was Andy Irons. And
rest in peace, Andy Irons.
Yeah, and rest in peace, Anthony Bourdain. It's weird too when you see two people that you look up to pass away in such a tragic way. Because I think that was part of my development as a man, to go, okay, there's things that you look up to those people about, but there's also things that you can learn from them. And one of the things that I really took away from Anthony Bourdain was he took time to talk to every single person that was at Tasty Crust with us. And I thought that was amazing. Was, you know, there's this guy who's famous, and everybody that wanted to come up and talk with him, he talked to them, and it was very genuine in his conversation. And that showed me that there was not only a humility, but also just a desire to learn, you know, and leaving yourself open to any single conversation that would happen. And to this day, like, some of my favorite conversations or things that I remember are these like airport bar conversations when you're just having a beer waiting for your flight, and you talk to a person next to you, or you're waiting in line and you strike up a conversation. And I think Anthony Bourdain, when we were doing the interview, he knew exactly what I was going to say. I knew some of the things that he was going to ask me, but we're talking, and Brad James, like, I'm kind of getting chicken skin when I'm even telling you this story right now. I remember I'm telling him about that as a Native Hawaiian and as a journalist, I look up to the Maori, and all of the Hawaiian journalists, we look up to the Maoris because they held on to their language, and you just see how good their news is, you see how good their feature films. And he goes, wait, fuck that, let me stop you right there. And then I remember looking at the camera like this, like, Mike, you're the camera. And then he goes, fuck them. They're not going to put them on the TV. And he's like, look at me. And he's like, and he puts his finger in my face and he's like, hey, don't you ever as a Hawaiian think down of yourself and compare yourself to the Maori. I've been around them. They have their language, but they have this masculine culture and they have these problems in their society because they only held on to the masculine side of their culture and their warrior culture. What I know of the Hawaiians is you were able to hold on to your masculine side of your culture and the feminine side of your culture. And I can see that in your hula, and you be proud of that every time.
Wow.
And then I looked at the camera again, and he's like, oh, okay, now we can keep going.
Wow.
But he took some time to just have a conversation with me, fuck me up with some truth. And that's something I still mahalo Anthony for doing, is that just made me that much of a more proud Hawaiian. I never thought like a guy from New York and a celebrity chef would ever do that, but that was what he gave to me.
Well, absolutely, because he's been around the world, he's seen many cultures, he's hearing what you're saying, and then he's addressing what you're saying. So let's talk about the hat you were wearing.
Oh yeah, so like I mean, I still love bucket hats. It's like something I've loved since I was young, and me and my younger brother, we would always fight over this one bucket hat. And so when I went on a Bourdain show, there was this Palaka tri-lock bucket hat that Fitted made that I still have, that I love.
Shout out Fitted.
And so I wore it on the show, and my wife to this day still hates when I wear all these bucket hats. And every time we watch Parts Unknown, she still goes, I don't know why you wore that hat.
Now, a Palaka hat, what does that symbolize?
Palaka is the original workwear of Hawaii's plantations.
Okay.
And it's a plaid pattern that has kind of a denim blue color.
Okay.
But what I love about Palaka is it, like, most of the time it's blue and white, and I'm a Kamehameha grad.
Yeah.
My wife's a Kamehameha grad, and
Okay.
that's why, like, anytime that I can wear blue and white, I'm gonna feel really proud.
Absolutely.
And what's kind of funny too is, like, my wife is 2 years younger than me, and we both went to Kamehameha, did not know each other at Kamehameha, and my father-in-law and both my parents graduated from Kamehameha in the class of 72. They knew each other.
Okay.
And frick, man, like, we knew each other for like 10 years before we even got together.
Interesting. So your wife, you said, helped you because she's an accountant. She knows numbers. She can crunch numbers. How did you guys meet?
So my wife and I first met when we were both going to school in San Diego.
Okay.
And we were friends, and we both dated other people. And so let's say we met in 2001. Fast forward to 2011, and Kuha'o, he tells me, like, oh, okay, hey, let's have this meeting with my dad and Wei Fang and Inter Island Terminal, and we're thinking of doing this art show, and we want you to be a part of it. And I was like, oh, I'm not an artist, but okay, bro, like, we'll go. And we went to the V Lounge. And
classic.
Yeah, that was like the time, V Lounge was still going, right?
Yeah.
And I remember going to the meeting, and they did this art show, and it was called Ito, because one of the reasons I like to go by my last name Ito is that's also the airport code for Hilo. So you kind of say like Ito and Hilo in the same way, right?
Absolutely.
So they're like, hey, we're gonna call it Ito, and since we're going to call it that, we want you to do the public relations for it, and we want you to create this content. I was like, wow, that's awesome. And then they gave me a tie, and I still have this tie. It was the first Zane tie I ever had, and it's a one-off. And this is brown Ka'uluwehi o Kekai. No, sorry, Ka'uluwehi Keokaha tie. And like, Kuha'o was like on me earlier that night, like, hey, we're gonna go to this meeting, and it's Mardi Gras, and then we're gonna go out. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna go out with you. Like, I'll go to the meeting, say what's up with your dad. You know, we can drink some beers, and then like, bah, I'm going home. Like I remember I was wearing shorts, a chambray, and like white Vans off the wall shoes. And I'm like, I'm not dressed to go out. You know, like I'm gonna go home. I still have my backpack on and my laptop on my back. I'm gonna go home. It's like, nah, we're gonna go out. He gives me the tie. And then I was like, well, shit, bro, you just gave me this tie. I feel obligated to go out now. And I remember Sig drops us off in Chinatown. And I'm like, oh, your dad is dropping us off to go out like we're 17 or something. And, you know, we're in our late 20s. And I remember we went and dropped off my backpack at Hotel Blaze, that were Contrast had an office. And at the time, I think we did a review of these vodkas. So we have all this vodka and vitamin water. So I'm like, oh, okay, let's just drink the next of the vitamin water and we'll fill it up with vodka. So we're walking around, and it's a block party. Then I see my wife from far away. And I'm like, hey, KZ, you know, I've been trying to hit on this girl for 10 years. I haven't seen her in a long time, but I see her over here with her friend. Can you just distract the friend and let me go talk to her? He's like, yeah, Ito, I got you. So we're over there in Hotel Street. We go and talk to them, and then my wife still says this too. It was like, when I had that vodka vitamin water, she's like, oh, this is my kind of guy. And then I remember we went out to Jason Cuttinella's office in NMG. We went and partied up there a little bit, and then we went to Next Door. Chris Kahunahana was still owner of Next Door at the time. We were partying in there, and then my wife, you know, we're getting faded, and she took me by surprise, where she's like, oh, I just want to make out with you right now. And I stumbled, and I was like, yeah, I'm into that. And she's like, no, you took too long, but you can have my number. And got her number, and to this day, Kuha'o Zane is still my wife Kahina's favorite out of all my friends, and Kuha'o was in my wedding party, and I still mahalo Kuha'o to this day because he helped introduce me and get me together with my wife. And we have a son who is 2 years old. His name's Keave Okapohoku, and we're gonna have a daughter on March 26th.
Whoa, congratulations.
Thank you. And then we make 5 years married on May 24th.
Wow. What a turn of events. Just, of course, because your friends, this is all your friends now, you're kind of getting with, and then you knew her from quite some time, 10 years, never, you know what I mean, Komema, that's an amazing story. And so, how do you balance the family life and your career?
My career is not my social life anymore. My social life is very much revolved around my family. I think how I balance my career, though, is by being a lot more strategic. When I was younger, I took every single job that came at me. Now I'll take the jobs that make sense, and I'll take the jobs that I feel like will either put my family in a better place, or if it's going to lead to an opportunity for us to do something well. Like I can give you an example. It's like my past birthday, I was asked to be the moderator of the Big Wave Risk Assessment Group's panel. And I was like, you know, like money wise, I don't know like how good this job is. And then I told my wife about it, and it entailed me driving up to Turtle Bay. And I was like, well, hey, what if they give us a night at Turtle Bay and we'll go up there for my birthday? She was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. You know, that'll be a fun staycation. So I was like, okay, I'll take that job. Took the job, and my son loved it and got to play in the pool. But like my favorite part about that whole job and that whole thing was my son, who's like 2 at the time, took it upon himself to use the potty and like just wanted to like climb up to the potty and peed and took a poop. And I was just tripping out like, wow, he did this on my birthday, you know, like we didn't even push him. And you know, that's kind of like a story I think other dads or parents will understand. But you know, that's what I mean about taking a job and it means something for the family. You know, it's not money anymore. Like money, I mean, we still need money because we're a growing family. But when I choose things, now it has to have some type of benefit for my family. You know, and so like my job right now, I work full time for Zippy's, which is Hawaii comfort food. There's 24 locations, and I head up their public relations, their community relations divisions, and my official title is communications and social media manager. And one of the most attractive things about working for Zippy's is I have amazing medical benefits for myself and my family.
Amazing.
And that's allowed my wife to start her own accounting firm and business. So like right now at this point, like my wife is the entrepreneur, you know, and it's hustling, and that's her first time doing a business, but she was so supportive of me through Contrast Magazine, through Paella Projects, all these other business endeavors. And if it's my time to be the foundation, then that's the way I mahalo her.
Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel Ikaika Ito, we in the mix right now. You listen to Slap Radio. We're going to take a break right now. Let's go. We're back in the mix right now. We got Daniel Ikaika Ito. You're listening to Slap Radio right now. So we heard you come up. A lot of success stories, a lot of giving back as well, which has contributed to your success. Where are you at now?
Right now, I'm very proud to say I'm the communications and social media manager of FCH Enterprises, which is the family company of Zippy's. Zippy's occupies 90% of my work. The other 10% is filled by the sister companies or the sister brands, Pomaikai Ballrooms, a cater experience, Food Solutions International, as well as Napoleon's Bakery. And I'm glad you mentioned giving back, James, because I think you hear my story and you think, wow, this guy got lucky, you know, a lot of times. And that's totally true. But I think I'm always due these little lucky streaks because throughout my career, I made a point to give back to the organizations or the passions that have given me a lot. And so one of my first experiences was giving back is being coach of the Kamehameha Surf Team. I'm going on my 10th season as coach of the Kamehameha Surf Team. I'm very proud to say that we started the Kamehameha Surf Team from Ezekiel Lau wanting to compete in an additional division of the National Scholastic Surfing Association. And I don't know if it's ironically that it happened. We won 2 national titles, and that was after Zeke graduated. And Zeke's still a friend and somebody who makes me feel really grateful that he appreciates my opinion, especially when it comes to his career. And I remember when he was young, I remember having a conversation with him after a contest and going, hey, bro, like, I gotta tell you, there's nothing I can tell you that's gonna be advantageous to you being a better surfer. You're gonna be far better of a surfer than I'll ever be. But what I can tell you is how to be a good Hawaiian. So when I do come and talk to you and I do tell you these things, it's always from the point of like, I want you to be a good Hawaiian and be a professional. And so I'm still lucky that he listens to me. And you know, from giving back as a surf team coach, that's also put me into positions where I just came from a board meeting for Nakamakai, which is a nonprofit organization that does free ocean clinics around Oahu. I also sit on American Heart Association board, and I was also the founding president of the Native Hawaiian Journalism Association called Ahahui Haku Mo'olelo. And I still feel like I could give back and give even more. So, you know, if there's a cause or something that I'm passionate about, or somebody like a friend approaches me to be a part of something, once again, I'll say, like my wife says, I don't know how to say no, but I tell my wife, like, why am I going to say no if I know I can help, if I know I can do something good? And through all of that comes all this other success, and I almost think like success career-wise at this point is a byproduct of just being willing to give my time and my unique skill set to these different organizations. And it's one of those things that I think about where I'm gonna do it because I want a certain resource, or I want a certain program, or I want a certain organization to be there when my kids get older, and for them to take advantage of it.
Interesting. And a lot of the moves you have made is nowadays caters around your family. So tell us a little bit about Zippy's and what you're doing there.
So Zippy's, I think I kind of mentioned it earlier. It's a job that I took because of how good the medical benefits were for my family, which allowed my wife to go off on her own and have her accounting business. Shout out KPI Accounting, Kahina Perkins Ito Accounting.
Shout out to them.
But one of the main reasons I went to go work at Zippy's was I remember being in my 20s thinking I knew everything. And then when I got to 30, I was like, oh, I don't really know that much. And then when I finally got to 35, I was like, damn, I don't know shit. And the older I get, the more I realize I don't know shit. And when I kept getting older, I started realizing was I need to identify different mentors to help me learn, and looking for mentors that weren't necessarily like me or had the same interests, but people who could teach me something. And one of my first mentors was Matt Walker, an editor of Surfing Magazine, who was from the East Coast. He gave me one of the most valuable lessons, and it's pace and how you work. And I still work at a really fast pace. I get shit done faster than everybody else. And Matt was from the East Coast, and he gave me that game, and he told me, it was like, hey, Hawaiians, you have a reputation of working slower. I'm from the East Coast. We have the reputation of work faster. He's like, if you want to be successful, work at my pace and kill it. And I do that. And that's been one of my differentiators to my other peers, is like how fast I work and how quick I can turn around content. And then one of my other mentors was this guy Bobby Sanaha, who was the publisher of Hawaii Business Magazine, created this position of digital media director. And like Bobby saw things in myself that I didn't really see, but he really cultivated my leadership and making me confident in my leadership style, and encouraged me to do a program called the Pacific Century Fellows. Shout out to Mufi Hanneman.
Shout out.
And that also defined my leadership style, which is being a servant leader and being a leader that supports their people. And it's the people that are really important, not so much the leader, and it's almost like you took the hierarchy and the pyramid and you flipped it. And what I like about the inverted pyramid is like that's the journalism writing style too, where the most important stuff are at the top of the pyramid and the least important stuff is at the bottom. And in the inverted pyramid, in a servant leadership perspective, the leader is at the bottom to support everything else, And so there was Bobby, Mufi, and the reason I went to Zippy's is I identified Kevin Yim, who's the vice president of marketing and who's my boss, as someone I wanted to be my mentor. And so when Kevin went to Zippy's, I remember one of my best friends, Matt Kawe, texting me, and he's a senior director of operations at Zippy's, going, hey, we just hired this guy named Kevin from Hawaiian Airlines. He worked in marketing. Do you know who that is? And then I texted him back. I was like, Kevin Yim. He's like, yeah, that's his name. Do you know who he is? And I was like, bruh, it's like you scooped up Tom Brady for your fantasy football team on the waiver wire. I don't know what you guys did or what you offered him, but I'm tripping that you got him. And then Kevin created my position, and he tells Matt, like, hey, tell Ito to apply for this job. As soon as I heard about it, I was like, Matt, would I work with Kevin? He's like, you would report to Kevin. I'm like, tell him I'm going to do the application this afternoon. And I was happy at Hawaii Business Magazine, but I just knew that there's still a lot I need to learn in my career. And then this was the guy that I would be willing to jump into the trenches with.
Awesome. And once you jumped it, you got the job, obviously. You got the gig, and then it's kind of just skyrocketed from there, because I see a big change in Zippy's now. Can you talk about the changes that you have put forth or assisted with?
Yeah. Kevin was the leader of the rebrand of Zippy's, and that's why you see Zippy's with the new logo and the orange color. And that was one of the things that really attracted me to the job was, we get to work on a rebrand. You know, you're going to lead the rebrand. Okay, with a rebrand comes the necessity for content. And so, like, I was hired to do public relations and community relations, but more so it was to generate content. And so the fun part about my job is now having a big budget and a marketing budget to create cool content. You see that with Simon Says. You see that with Kamehadar's mural in our Makiki restaurant, and you see that with all the collaborations that we get to do with companies like Information and Fitted, who were the two first advertisers of Contrast Magazine. And so one of the things that I hold on to a lot in my job is I get the freedom to work with these companies and friends who supported me for so many years at Contrast Magazine. And so a lot of times I'll even tell them, like, hey, Zippy's wants to work with you. How can we make your life easier?
Amazing. So what can we look forward to at the current position that you're at now?
What you're gonna see with Zippy's is we're expanding to Las Vegas, so we're going to the 9th Island. That'll
huge.
That'll be January 2021. We got a collaboration with Fitted about to drop in March. We're working on another collaboration with 88 Tees. We're doing a new video series called Zippy's Presents the Third Place. So in urban planning, the third place is known as like a community builder. And so in the mainland, a lot of those community builder places are like McDonald's or Starbucks. But I think as locals, we know that we congregate at Zippy's. You know, you celebrate at Zippy's. You have business meetings at Zippy's. You take your grandparents to eat at Zippy's. When you don't know what to feed your kids, you go and eat at Zippy's.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Do you have anything in store that you're currently working on?
You know, my 10-year plan, James, is I keep thinking about my kids and the world that they have to inherit. And I think that the world that they have to inherit is, at this point, contentious, especially when it comes to climate change. So, I mean, what I really want to do and what I've been working for is I'd like to create a biofuel jet fuel. And there's a certain type of tree that they're already growing in Hawaii, and it's called Pangamia. Pangamia is India's version of the kukui nut, and like Hawaiians, and we would use the kukui nut to light lamps and for skin purposes, you know, like sunblock or a salve. The Indians would use the same thing. The beauty of Pangamia is it's a legume similar to a soybean. So it pulls nitrogen and carbon from the atmosphere and it puts it back into the soil. Pangamia likes to grow in what's defined as distressed land. So land that was ex-sugar or ex-pineapple. So what I'd like to do, and this would be my 10-year plan, the big project is I'd like to go back to Hawaii Island on the Hamakua coast, plant a bunch of pangamia, graze cattle in between. When you squeeze the seed of the pangamia, the oil that comes from it has 10 times the yield of a soybean, which is the base of a jet fuel. The byproduct of that is called a seed cake. And if you remove the riboflavin from it, which that process exists, it becomes this high protein feed for cattle. So you can feed cattle this seed cake, you can finish them off. So instead of like sending cattle, so like what we do right now in Hawaii is we raise cattle to a certain point and then we ship it off to California. They get finished off in these feedlots because corn is subsidized by the government and it's pretty much free for them to eat. Fatten them up, then they ship them back over here slaughtered. So like in that whole process, you're burning all of this petroleum to even get the cattle up there, finish them off, butcher them. What I'd like to do is create a closed loop system where we're raising the pangamia, we're repairing the distressed land to create aina, land, or that which feeds us, and then we're grazing cattle in between because the cattle won't eat the tree because it has riboflavin in it. Then we take them and we finish them off with the seed cake. Then we take the oil and we make a jet fuel. And there is 3 buckets that Hawaii consumes petroleum products, right? The first bucket is producing electricity, but we don't need petroleum necessarily because we have now sun, wind power, and H-power where we burn our trash to create electricity. So that's kind of figured out, right? The second way we use petroleum products is for transportation. We're moving towards electric vehicles, right? So that's figured out. The third one that people still have a hard time figuring out right now, and the third bucket is logistics, how we move people from island to island or goods from island to island. And that's why we need some type of jet fuel, biofuel to be able to do that. And so that's my dream, and that's the side project that I'm working on in addition to a lot of other different projects at the same time.
Amazing. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, how can they get a hold of you?
You can hit me up on Instagram because social media is in my title. It's Ka_Ito, KA_ITO.
Advice for up-and-comers.
Advice for up-and-comers is to make sure you love what you do, make what you do, everything you do, and give back to your community and stay grateful the whole time.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much.
No, thank you, James.
Through. I really appreciate you coming through. Really appreciate you. The crew does too as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel Ikaika Ito dropping them gems, dropping them gold chains.
Mahalo.
Thank you very much for coming through. We appreciate it.